you go through any of those hip hop records and you play those different songs,
Right.
just off one verse alone, you give people permission to tell their story. But what if the person
Totally.
in the song is talking about something that reminds you of the old school neighborhood? You
Right.
can take that one song and build a whole conversation about love, grief, violence, and now you're going to start hearing everybody's story.
Well, Christopher, it is so wonderful to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for saying yes, for making time. I know we were just talking a little bit before we hit record, and you were sharing that you don't do these a lot. So I feel extremely honored that you said yes to me. So thank you for doing this.
Very welcome. Gratitude for even wanting to talk to me. So, for sure.
Absolutely. Well, I was sharing with you, I have a lot of ties to the city of Chicago. You are in Chicago as well. It's where you started your whole mission. And I've been here in health and wellness since my early days. I've lived here my whole life, went to college, medical school, worked in public health. So I have a real tie to the work that you're doing. May not be direct, but it's indirect. And so for me, this is really, really important to talk to you about the work you're doing. And so we'll get into all the things, but I would love if we could start with a little bit about your journey into mental health advocacy, particularly focusing on communities of color, of the Black
Absolutely.
community. How did you get into this? You have a beautiful, amazing story. I'd love for you to share it.
Well, so Avanti, it's a pretty interesting situation because if you would have told me 6, 7 years ago, even 10, that I would be running a coffee shop, which I
Yeah.
was never a coffee guy. And then that coffee shop would be the hub or the refuge, if you will, the foundation to this mental health organization where we help people grow their mental health, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I just wasn't in that space. I didn't understand that. That wasn't a part of the language in our community amongst my friends. Everything was reactive, right? From an emotional standpoint, you're
Mm-hmm.
surviving. I'm very much someone who lived in poverty. I was probably a what you may consider high alert because my life wasn't the best at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then one day in 2018, just everything kind of came to a head. I'm working a dead end job. My credit score is like extremely low. I'm pacing 40. And when you look at the childhood trauma, the unresolved childhood trauma, the disappointment, all the grief that we collect over the years, not just loss of loved ones, but loss of
Sure.
opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
you're right. Um, Sitting in this coffee shop one day in Millennium Park train station, nestled in the corner of
Yeah.
this Starbucks, and
Yeah.
I just fell apart. A very, very messy cry. And so, if I can put it into context, I think I was thinking about I'm working this BS job. I'm in a relationship. I don't think she liked me, and I don't feel valued. Something I really don't talk about, but that was a lot. That had a lot to do with what was going on in that moment too.
Mm-hmm.
And this job I'm working every day don't pay me well. I never finished school. A survivor of 3 suicide attempts. I never knew my parents. I think everything at once just hit me. And I had a very necessary, messy cry. But I think the thing that was so beautiful in that moment, I realized that unlike other times, I didn't want to die in that moment. It wasn't I'm messy because the next step is to do a fourth suicide attempt, right? No, it was, I understand that I want to live. I just don't know how, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so in that moment, I had enough agency after cleaning up, from this messy cry to take my butt to therapy. And I searched psychology today. I found my therapist within weeks. And then after a few tough sessions, I went home one day after having all this language and discussion. And I wrote down 3 words that ultimately changed my life, which is coffee, hip hop, and therapy. I had to come back to it later and cross out therapy and say, that doesn't sound right. And then that's when I added mental health once I started to understand what that was. And so that was the beginning of my journey. That was the latter part of 2018. And then ultimately, I started doing the work of crafting the logo, crafting the business plan. Like, what is this going to be? And then we officially launched on July 7th, 2019. So that was my start.
Wow. So it came out of a personal need. And thank you for sharing that so openly.
You're
I
very welcome.
appreciate that. It's not easy to do that.
Hmm.
And I think that from our personal journeys, our own stories, that's where so much of the work that we want to do in the world, it comes from that. If we can find
Absolutely.
the strength to do it, right? It's what we call in my culture, I'm South Asian, dharma, right? Our life's work, our life's purpose. For me,
Mm.
the work that I do in Ayurveda and yoga therapy outside of being a physician, right? I've made a change. This is my dharma, my life's work, to use that platform, to use that MD behind my name to do what I'm doing now, to educate, to advocate, right? And so
Absolutely.
what you're talking about is so, so important because it comes from a deep place of understanding and need, something that you needed, right?
Absolutely. No, I had definitely needed, and I like that you're talking about that Dharma, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so for me, it was how do I leverage my
Yes.
own suicide ideation? How do I leverage the grief and the disappointment? Because for so long, the grief and the disappointment and then the desire to kill or murder Christopher. And the reason why I'm using those words, because I know they say complete your life from, but I go a step further so I can talk very raw and openly because I realize if I had made a decision to murder Christopher,
Mm-hmm.
to turn my own clock off, my
Mm-hmm.
life is associated and attached to so many other brilliant and beautiful people who need me. Like my son wouldn't be here, you know? So I said, how do I not allow my mental illness or my PTSD, right? All these different things I was dealing with. How do I find a way to leverage all the pain to turn it into something else? And that was a very difficult thing. So when you see the logo, the 6453, which is the old childhood address, which is where everything happened, 6453 South Hermitage in the city of Chicago, 12 years of the abuse, which ultimately impacted my adult life. And the moment I started to go to therapy and I started to learn so many things, I started to have room mentally to receive new stuff. And that's what trauma does when you're stuck emotionally and you're stuck in a place where it's hard to receive anything because you don't have the agency or the capacity,
Mm-hmm.
there's no new strategies. There's no
Mm-hmm.
rationale, right? And so, like, the moment I understood what this was, I said, okay, I'm going to leverage all of these different things.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who are listening, like, what is he talking about? What do you mean? How can you leverage, like, your suicide ideation or leverage? Well, what I did,
Mm-hmm.
the more it hurt, go create. Like the
Mm-hmm.
more I'm in pain and disappointment, go create. And then
Mm-hmm.
that's one season. Like the next season is, as I grow, right? With more, healthy coping skills, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I'm being provided and taught language, because most of the time people don't know how to articulate what's happening. They can't even describe what's going on, so they
Right.
either avoid or in like most cultures, I think in my community, I saw a lot of people replacing stuff. If
Mm-hmm.
you lose something, just go get
Right.
another.
Mm-hmm.
But I lost something, but we're taught to just go get another relationship. And you don't
Yeah.
even process. And that's what trauma is. It's like unprocessed grief,
Sure. Right.
right? And
Right.
us, and so the leveraging is let's stop, let's process that it happened, let's feel it deep. Let's not focus on toxic positivity by saying, I'm okay, I'm
Yeah.
cool,
Right.
there's some lessons here. No, that's a loss. And you won't really tap into a significant lesson until you feel that
Right.
loss. You gotta feel it for what it is.
Right.
And so I was training myself to say, okay, I'm not gonna let this thing have me. It had me for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where the leveraging became. Because I said, I'm a mess. I've been a mess for a long time, but I'm still beautiful. That's the duality of life. I'm both
Mm-hmm.
messy.
Yep.
Avanti, and I'm still beautiful. So
Mhm.
how do I turn this mess into a beautiful message?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
But beautiful message. I mean, it's the but and, right? The ability to hold two truths as at the same time, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. That's
Yeah.
most important.
Right. And so you alluded to one thing when you were just talking about, in your community and what you knew, the people that you knew, it was this behavior of replacing things. So I want to dig a little deeper because, we can read all these reports. I've been doing research. I always prepare for my, interviews before I get on the mic with somebody about the specific mental health challenges that face the Black community disproportionately. From your perspective, what are those? Because you're on the ground doing this work, you're experiencing it as well personally.
Hmm.
Tell us about that because, again, we can read it in all these, studies and reports, but let's talk about what reality is. Like, what are you seeing?
I thought about something like today, and I don't know if I should go deep into it, like, but I'll paraphrase it. I think it'd be enough information for you and the audience to articulate or to sort of
Mhm.
mind through like what I'm saying. But
Yeah.
so something that there's no report for is something,
Hmm.
there are these invisible indicators or these invisible things that are nestled within the Black community that we're all dealing with, and no one sees them but us. And so therefore it's hard to put a percentage to, right?
Sure.
Or it's hard to say you can't diagnose what you don't see, right? So Black people for a long time have been very forgiving, and because we grew up the way we grew up from all the pain, right? So not only are we dealing with childhood trauma by the hands of the people that we grow in spaces with,
Hmm.
but the systematic oppression and trauma, right?
Hmm.
And so when you're told get over it, time has passed, yeah, but it's still unprocessed stuff.
Hmm.
There's never been a resolution or a solution, right? And
Hmm.
so this invisible thing that shows up, like whenever I see a white person, right, which is why it's hard, like for me to have white employees, white partners, right? Because while I may not be afraid of you because of what has happened, there's these invisible indicators or triggers that tell me don't let them in. And so
Hmm.
I don't know if I'm hurting my organization or am I protecting my organization. But the fact that I have to think about that at all, that is the privilege of what we talk about with certain races. You don't have to deal with that type of stress.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So that alone is something that there's no number for, we have we had to become very resourceful people because in which the conditions that we grew up in, right,
Hmm.
raised from the foundation of America to the present day, right? Because
Hmm.
I'm thinking about intergenerational trauma,
For sure. Yes.
community trauma, family trauma, all this stuff, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
when I think about that, oh, what an exhausting life.
Yes.
And the only thing that comes close to comparing so people can understand what I'm saying is poverty. It's the only thing that can come close to from a comparison standpoint because they're almost the same because technically there's a poverty or a lack of community. That's a form of poverty, right?
Hmm.
If you don't have proper understanding, that's a form of poverty, right?
Hmm.
So it's not just food insecurity, not
Sure.
financial insecure,
Yes.
emotionally insecure. And so I like to talk about those things and like get people to think about the invisible stuff that you can't
Yes.
see and is exhausting and we cannot breathe because you don't get it because you said, oh, it's over. It's a new day. You're free. No, because systematically, like when I walk down the street, if I have a coffee, hip hop, or mental health logo on, and you know what that is, you treat me with respect. But if I
Right.
don't have that on, and you just see a black man walking, I see how you react to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is one of the things. And so I said this when I was thinking about Kanye West, and I don't never agree with what anybody says wholeheartedly because we don't agree, right? There's perspective, how you grew up, I don't know your situation, so I don't agree with everything everybody says. But the one thing I thought about was, man, black people are so forgiving. We had to be a forgiving people to even live in this country and go to work every day very confident. But man, no one really forgives us.
Hmm.
Do you know how exhausting that is?
I can only imagine again.
So, yeah, I mean, like, so I can easily tell you what everybody reads. Yeah, if you grew up in
Yeah,
poverty, there's we already know like what we're lacking in our communities. But
sure.
let's talk about the thing that you don't know. That is tough. And so running a organization, I am often seen and viewed as the black man running an organization.
Hmm.
I recognize I'm black. I love the fact that I'm black. You
Hmm.
feel me? I stand by my community, but what I want us to see, color, understand, and I don't want us to be passive about it. But someday I just want to be the guy who's doing good by people. And I don't
Hmm.
want you to make a decision because
Right.
of color.
Right.
And because diversity and inclusion programs and resources and companies wasn't created for black people, it was created for other races to acknowledge that we need the support. Right?
Hmm.
So yeah, and then all the other facts that come with that. So I wanted to talk about that because there's this high level invisible thing that is
Yes.
impacting our lives.
Right.
And because we don't talk about them, because everybody says that happened 50 years ago. You
Right.
should be look how far you all have come. But it's the invisible things
Right. And what you're
that are
getting at is root cause. It's about what's really underneath when you peel back the layer after the layer after the layer, right? That's what you're talking about. It's what we talk about in Ayurveda as, what is underneath the symptom, right? If you're talking about it from a health perspective, which is a medical perspective, which I'm coming from, right? You can look at a symptom on the surface. Like, what's the cause of the symptom? And you can say, let's throw this at it, let's throw that at it. Let's cure the symptom, right? Let's get rid of the symptom. The problem is that you can get rid of it for a little while by medication, surgery, whatever. That's the Western model that I came from, that I was trained in as a physician, right? The reason I went back to Ayurveda, the healing system of my ancestors, is because we do so much more. It's about prevention. It's about looking at the root cause. Where is it coming from? Right? Yes,
absolutely.
let's help the person with the acute discomfort that they're in. That is important. Absolutely. But we can't stop at that. And that's where Western medicine, from my perspective, goes wrong. That's where what's lacking in
Absolutely.
Western medicine. We got to look at what's underneath it. And that's what I feel like you're sort of alluding to. That's what's coming up for me when you say that. Like, let's look at the invisible stuff that's going on.
Yeah, I mean, like, absolutely. So we're pacing 5 years. So as of July,
Hmm.
7th, 2024, we'll be 5 years. And
Amazing.
thank you, which is,
Congratulations. That's huge.
thank you. I can feel every bit of it too.
I'm sure you
So
can.
I'm both proud and like I earned these gray hairs. Right. Well, when I started the therapy program in 2021, January up until present day, like when we closed the fourth quarter of like last year, I was sitting back with this $67,000 debt, and I'm looking at how we were attempting every year to spend $250,000 on free therapy, and then at the end of that, I said, this isn't sustainable for us to be assuming the debt. And I learned in my own therapy journey because as much as I was building this organization, I was also in real time still going to therapy. It wasn't like I went to therapy and said, okay, 3 years later, after
Yeah.
having all this work,
Right.
I'm gonna go do this thing. I was doing it in real time. So I was very much, in my first stages, right? Trying to
Hmm.
build something for other people in the midst of COVID. So it was very problematic to
Yes.
do what I was doing. It was
Yes.
a risk. It was a huge
Yeah.
risk, right?
Hmm.
And so at the end of last year, I said, you know what? Free isn't sexy. We're giving away all these. We have this beautiful coffee shop. We have prime real estate. The model makes sense, but when you look at from an infrastructure sustainability, can we be around another 5 or 10 years? Free isn't sexy. Free doesn't actually attract donors who understand in order for you to sustain, if you're just giving the house away, I understand the intention, but if you're just giving the house
Right.
away, I don't know if I should seed into that because you're always going to need money. We need to empower you financially so you can find a way to increase, your internal system so you can make more money based upon what we're sending to you, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So we need to see like a better model or
Right.
right. And so I was like, okay, free isn't sexy, Avanti, because most people don't respect free,
Yeah.
right? So I was watching how we was going from 43% to 57% from a success rate, and I was like, what is the problem? Oh, okay, here's the problem. Money isn't the only issue. That isn't the only barrier in the black community or anybody who's coming. Some people need a massage. Some people need a job. Some people need food. Talk therapy isn't the only form of therapy.
Right.
So when we look at our campaign, so we're coffee, hip hop, and mental health, and our
Yep.
goal is to normalize therapy, right?
Right.
How are we going to do that? Well, food is therapy.
Yes.
Community is therapy.
Yes.
Proper clothing, water, the basic needs of life, that's therapy. So we
Yeah.
started to look and say, okay, let's pull it back. Let's stop all these programs. Let's stop paying for people to go to therapy. We did it for 3 years. We have nothing to prove. We said everything that we did everything we said that we were going to do. So we don't have nothing to prove. So
Right.
let's stop.
Hmm.
Let's look at our expenses and let's say, well, the coffee shop can't go away. So if we continue to put ourselves in debt, then we're gonna lose this whole thing. So
Right.
let's be smart here. Let's be smart. Let's step back, talk to my mentors, talk to my team. Here's the answer. We're going to create normalizedtherapy.com. We're going to release it on May 1st. Let's go back to the original plan, turn the cafe into Normalized Therapy Cafe. Let's make a more zenful wellness space. Let's turn it into an upscale boutique. Let's go back to what the plan was, community and commerce. Let's do
Hmm.
this thing different.
Hmm.
Let's make money because every nonprofit has to have
For sure.
profit.
Right.
But we understand that the barriers are grief, this unprocessed grief, disappointment. I feel vulnerable today, but I don't feel vulnerable tomorrow because I'm protective,
Yep.
survivor mode. Even me going to get surgery for my rupture Achilles taught me something very valuable. The doctor or the surgeon who would do the surgery was in my therapy program like before he even started doing surgery because not because he didn't have the money. That's the stigma. I don't really know how to do this. So I said, you know what? It's not just money. It's not just black people. It's any human being who has lived this life long enough is going to have some heartbreak and disappointment. So
Yep.
how do we help them navigate this life? Let's go back. It's
Right.
basic needs Avanti versus advanced needs.
Yeah.
And you're not and technically therapy is a basic need, but I'm looking at more high level. Are you gonna have the bandwidth to sit in a one-on-one every week if you don't have food?
Yeah.
So let's
Exactly.
go back to man's law hierarchy needs
Yeah.
and let's
Yeah.
really look at this thing, right?
Right.
I mean, because what are the barriers? Why are you stressed out? Oh,
Right.
you don't need talk therapy, figure it out. You probably need a mentor, right? Or
Right.
maybe you're working 60 hours a week.
Right.
So, it's looking at humanity one on one. What do we need on a daily basis to figure this
Right.
thing out? And so, I know that was a mouthful, but I'm trying to get you to understand that as a nonprofit doing this type of work, you have to like always look at your plan and your mission and say, we gotta be a little flexible in this. And we gotta really, really see what's happening because
Right.
if we're gonna be around for the next 5 years, then we have to like stop being so mission minded that we're not leaning into more thoughtful intention and wisdom.
Yeah, what you're talking about is actually really looking at what is it that people really need. Again, looking underneath, what's really the root cause, right?
Hmm.
So to say that we need to give therapy, which is a beautiful thing, and I absolutely agree
Hmm.
with you that most human beings, when they've lived long enough, or even if they haven't, everyone experiences trauma in some way, right?
In some way.
But looking
Absolutely.
at what's going on underneath. And so, one of my questions was to you, what do you think, some of the most significant barriers are to mental health in any community, but especially the Black community? You just actually answer the question, which is all of these things.
Yep. And shame. Shame and
Big one.
embarrassment are, yeah, man,
Big.
shame and embarrassment is something that I see in every community,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
And like the beautiful thing is, Avanti, is when you have a beautiful space that we have, where we have our collective community come in a room, there's a single mom, there's the family man and woman, there's the
Hmm.
corporate person, the doctor, the athlete, the
Right.
teenager, and they're all in one room. And what they have in common is, I like that song. I know what it's like to be in love. I know what it's like to be crushed, broken, and
Yep.
embarrassed.
Yep.
Oh, wow, we feel the same stuff. Yeah, because when
Yeah.
you live this life long enough,
Yeah.
you're going to be embarrassed by something. You're
Yeah.
going to be crushed by something.
Right.
And then those are the little bitty barriers that we don't really know that will become the bigger thing because we're taught to just get
Yeah. It's
over.
being human.
Yeah.
Right? Those are all the human emotions that we all feel. And so, you also mentioned something about, people saying, I like that song. So let's just backtrack for a second, because I know we're going to the future of what you're sort of envisioning as sort of how you're going to change things and sort of the next iteration of the work that you're doing. But let's just go backwards for a second. And can you tell me about how you connected this art form of hip hop with coffee and mental health? I know you said you were in a coffee shop, but like, how did you put those things together? And why do you think they're
Yeah.
so effective
Yeah. I mean,
together?
a lot of people don't know this, but if you look up Christopher LeMark on like iTunes or any musical
Yep.
platform, I spent the last 20 some odd years like performing,
Yep.
hip hop music. I'm a poet first and foremost.
Amazing.
I did those things, and I thought, and that was one of the disappointments in that coffee shop, like, performing artists like I thought I would, right? So there's some
Right.
disappointment there.
Hmm.
And so like when you look at coffee, it was been in this coffee shop that no one bothered me. It was no bias, no judgment. I had the space to just sit here and be messy and clean myself up, and then have this realization to go to therapy. But the reason why hip hop is there is because hip hop to me is just as important to the black community as the civil
Yeah.
rights, like the Black Panther Party movement, when like the Black Power movement, right? When
Hmm.
you look at what was going on in like culture, from the civil rights perspective, like the next thing that was very prominent to us was the hip hop community.
Hmm.
We were taught so much. You can talk about all the problematic stuff that comes with hip hop, but hip hop was a way that we talked about the AIDS epidemic. We talked
Hmm.
about, the stuff that we were going through. We was informing like all these other communities about what was happening in our
Right.
area with the
Hmm.
drugs and things of that nature. So that's why it was polarizing to people, because it was like, wow, for real? That, because when you tell someone a story that they cannot relate to, that becomes an interest point or entertainment. But more than anything, hip hop is a bridge. It's the way that we use it to connect to our community so we can speak their language, so we can say, hey, I'm meeting you where you are, but let me
Hmm.
tell you about this exceptional thing over here called mental health and this
Hmm.
counseling community, something I think that you can use, because technically you're using hip hop as a form of therapy if you're an artist. But if you're
Yes.
a listener,
Yes.
listening to these poetry, and because you got to think about hip hop has parented
Yes.
our community.
Yes. Yes.
That's some people that didn't have a father that stands by everything Jay-Z has said.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's the bridge.
Hmm.
It's how we bridge a gap between the community and the mental health space, right? And
Right.
then being someone that used hip hop as a way to diary my own journey, it's the
Right.
thing that helped me not want to kill myself, because I can go back to hip hop and write out my pain.
Hmm.
It was my first form of therapy. It was so many
Right.
people first form of therapy, because we trusted that art form and the
Right.
orators of that more so than the white guy that we would see on TV sitting across the couch. You don't relate, you don't understand, and while I
Right.
don't fear you, I don't trust you. So
Right.
this is my comfort zone here.
Right. And so how did you use hip hop as a way to connect with people. I mean, I understand what you're talking about. Music is such a powerful connector to people,
Yeah,
and it's
it's,
poetry and it's oral history and storytelling. All of that
yeah.
is embedded in hip hop.
Here's
How
how.
do
I mean,
you
here's
use
how.
it?
You put a bunch of people in a room, like I said earlier, you got all those different people in the room, but you
Right,
play like 808s and Heartbreak. You play the blueprint. You go through like Stillmatic or Illmatic. You go through any of those hip hop records and you play those different songs
right,
just off one verse alone. You can you can talk about. I mean, first of all, storytelling is super powerful. Like because when anyone's telling their story, you give people permission to tell their story. But what if the person
totally.
in the song is talking about something that reminds you of the old school neighborhood? We
Right,
can take that one song and build a whole conversation about love, grief, violence, and now you're going to start hearing everybody's story. And then
yeah,
know what that does? It makes the therapy space, the group therapy space, and our space much more easy. And it's like, oh man, I remember what happened back then. And then again, if you play a song that's talking about love and relationship, music is the only thing that doesn't ask for permission to insert in our lives. Just think about it. That's why we learn music fast, right? So when you look at the psychology and the power of music, when we're all shopping and we don't realize because we hear that song so much that we're naturally learning that. So we use that as a
right,
guiding point to
right.
like start or spark conversation,
Hmm.
right? Because it's also an icebreaker. You play the
Yeah.
favorite hip hop song, you play Love Yours by J. Cole, and
Hmm.
you're like, wow, you know what? There will always be somebody who will be seemingly so more attractive, who will have more opportunity. And that's the beauty about that. Hip hop is so intricate and so smart, so brilliant. You can say a whole lot in a 16 bar verse, which ultimately a hip hop song is anywhere between 2:30 to 3 minutes, and you can relate. Hip hop
Right.
relates, it connects, it does so much in a
Yeah.
3 minutes than you're doing in your whole life. So we have to
Yeah.
leverage that art form.
Yes.
I mean,
Absolutely.
you feel me? And like and that's how we use it. We like put you in a room, and I can't wait for the conversation that we're gonna have at the end of the month. And then we're gonna talk about the psychology and culture of hip hop. Where did it start? Where are we now? How did it evolve? And how is it impacting our community? When you do that, you get people to look around from an accountability standpoint and say, are we doing okay? Are we
Hmm.
okay? Are we
Hmm.
communicating okay? Right? Did hip hop go so commercial? Nah, it didn't go so commercial, but corporate just decided like to put money into one particular part of this hip hop culture, right? So as much as we're using it, we still have to be responsible with what we're saying and who we're
Yeah.
saying it to.
Yeah. And so, this takes me back to my early days in public health when I just graduated from college before I went to medical school. I was
Okay.
running a program for kids in the DCFS system here in
Mm,
Illinois, in Chicago. And we did some projects with a couple of mentors of mine who are in public health here in the city, using music as a way to get kids to open up about sexual health, about sexual protection. But that was back in the days when HIV and AIDS was, rampant,
mm,
huge. That's where I, graduated out of college into that
mm.
public health dilemma.
Ooh,
And so that was the kind of work we were doing. And we're using music as a way to ice break, to connect with kids who were
absolutely.
from all of these different neighborhoods in Chicago. So it just brings me back to that. Um, and so I understand how powerful music is. How do you, well, before we go forward, I want to ask you another question which is, can you share a moment, a story when you felt like, oh man, this is working. Like this is having an impact. This, this
Yeah,
idea that
yeah,
I had of this coffee shop and hip hop music as a way to connect with people, to understand why they need therapy, why mental health matters. Like, can you share a
yeah.
moment when you were like, oh my gosh, this is working. This is it.
I have so many stories, so many testimonies. I'm going to share something that happened just this past Saturday, right?
Love it.
And so I kicked off this, we stopped doing all the free therapy stuff, and we were disappointing some people, like, because they were so used to coming to our space, but we knew that financially, like, we just had to stop and
Mhm.
revamp. So I say, you
Right.
know what? Our community is asking for therapy, so how can we make it work? So let's bring back something where at least we can get everybody in the room again. And so we said, we're not going to do it after business hours. We'll do it within, like, the job, like the store hours. And so we did something called Make Room, like the Make Room series, right? Where it's a group 18 plus and older. Anybody from that age group can come in. All you gotta do is RSVP. Drinks are included. And essentially, you're having therapy for a price of a cup of coffee, right?
Mhm.
But the Make Room series is about addressing the uncomfortable things. We're making room for you to have the uncomfortable discussion. And so there are three E's that we want to focus on: to empower, to encourage, and to educate. That's the new phase, because we are learning that in order to grow your mental health, people need to grow their mental, emotional, and social awareness. And the only way you can do that is by tapping into, we got to feed the HI, not AI, but you need more human intelligence, right?
Yeah.
And so Make Room is about educating people. So it's like church, group therapy, and school. Psych
Mhm.
101. Okay, it's back. It's packed. Every seat is filled. They're in here. Every race. This is
Wow.
beautiful. And I'm not gonna go too much, but just because I want to protect, like, the people in that room.
Sure, of
But I'll
course.
say it is. There's a group that came from Milwaukee. I mean, like, first of all, like, when you know that somebody is driving from Milwaukee,
Yeah.
this isn't the first time. This people are flying from all over the world. And I'm
Wow.
not saying that from an exaggerated tone. I'm saying people
Wow.
literally make plans to come to coffee, hip hop, and mental health. And while they're in Chicago, they do a list of things. But what was top on that list was just to walk physically inside of coffee, hip hop, and mental health, because they saw it online, they follow our community, and they
Mhm.
want to come. And so, like, when you have somebody who is coming already traveling to us
Right.
from Milwaukee, and then you bring your friends or your family and you say they need help. So what's not happening in Milwaukee that's happening here in Chicago
Right.
that forces you to drive here, right? We held a space for somebody to literally say to us very openly, in the most painful way, I don't know what to do. It's high alert. I'm scared, but I need you. While that may not sound like the most biggest thing, you don't
No,
understand.
it does.
When someone feels that comfortable to say,
Yep.
I don't know what to do, I need help, and you traveled an hour plus and you found comfort in saying that, and now we naturally become your accountability partner
Mhm.
and say, hey, give me your number. And that's something I normally don't do. But when you see that, you have to say, okay, this is time for a different step of,
Right.
work, right? And that was a man. And it is happening more and more. Women are naturally vocal, right?
Mhm.
So 74.9% of our audience online are women, and the
Mhm.
other are men. But that number is higher in the last 6 months, that men are being more vocal.
Mhm.
That is
Mhm.
a win.
That's a
They're
huge win.
asking. It's
Huge
a
win.
huge win. They're saying,
Huge win.
as soon as we launched this Make Room series, a black young man messaged me and said, "Thank you for bringing group therapy
I
to
gotta
me.
take that.
Thank you." He didn't care that there was now a price on it. He didn't care about that. Thank you for making
Mm.
this. You feel me? And that is happening over and over and over again. But it's so much power when a black man.
Yes.
See, a lot of times when you
Yes.
have black organizations that do stuff, we always use the language of black and brown. Nah, nah. While I'm advocating and fighting for all of us, my number one priority and value is to always make room for black people,
I agree.
right? And so when black
Yeah.
people are able to say very safe, they can feel safe enough to say, I'm broken. I'm lost.
Mhm.
I'm hurting. I don't know what to do, but I'm here.
Yes.
Oh my God, that's the first step to healing.
Yeah.
To to acknowledge,
Yes.
to own, to
Yes.
accept, to be aware, and to verbalize it. Oh, now we can get some work going. So that is a
Right.
constant testimony. That is constantly
Yeah.
happening,
Yeah. That's
right?
amazing. That's incredible.
Yes.
I gotta sit with that because just coming from the healthcare perspective to have
Hmm.
anyone in any program, any encounter that you have with another human being say that to you, like brings tears to my eyes because that is the reason we do this work, right?
Absolutely.
That's back to that dharma. This is why this is my dharma. This is why this is your dharma, is to have that impact and to have someone say, you are helping me. I'm here to ask for help. I feel safe enough to ask for help.
Yes.
Oh, like, I mean, just brings tears. I mean, yeah.
No, you can take a moment while I read because you keep saying Dharma, and I want to make sure anytime I hear words, and I heard of this, but I always like to read the definition. So, Dharma denotes behaviors that are considered to be in accord with RTA, the order and custom that makes life and universe possible. This includes duties, rights, laws, conduct, virtues, and a right way of living. The concept is believed to have a trans-temporal validity and is one of the four. Now, this is a word, Purasarthas.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
It's one of the four. It's the best word. Sometimes it's hard to translate from Sanskrit into English because you
Hmm.
lose some of the essence. But it's one of the four pursuits in life, virtues in life,
Hmm.
is to pursue your dharma. The other is enjoyment, right? There's four of them, and these and also abundance, right?
Hmm.
These are things that
So,
you.
so I know we're going down a rabbit hole here, but I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
So like this is Hindu, right? This is Hinduism,
Well,
or like
it's yeah.
Buddha. Buddha.
Part of it is Hinduism, but mostly it's a philosophy.
It's a
It's
philosophy.
Vedic
Okay,
philosophy that comes from South Asia, from India specifically. So
I
it's
like
not
this.
necessarily religious. It's a philosophy, a way of life.
So it's righteousness, moral values. And if you say artha, then that's prosperity, economic
Yes.
values,
Yes.
comma, pleasure, love, psychological values, and then like the moksha is
Moksha,
liberation,
liberation,
moksha, okay,
moksha.
liberation, moksha. Thank you.
Mhm.
Liberation, spiritual values, self actualization, which is
Yes.
everything that we're doing. Mindful,
Yes.
mindful.
Yes.
I
Yes.
like this. I really do
Yeah.
like this.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
that is, what you're talking about when you talk about, again, the story that you just shared. So thank you for doing that.
You're very welcome, ma'am.
It is the reason that so much of what I do, so much of what I'm hearing you do, that's the reason we do what we do, to provide that connection to other human beings, to help them on their journey in life. I could keep talking to you, but I know that I'm coming up on time and I want to be respectful of your time. So I need to ask you a
No,
couple more questions.
I'll give you to 2:15.
Ah, yes, look at that.
I
Okay.
got you. I got you. I got you.
Amazing, amazing. So let me ask you this. I want to turn to sort of mental health professionals, like sort of the advocacy. And, what do you feel is the importance of representation in mental health? Because I think a little bit of what we're talking about also is that, when you create this space for people to feel safe, right?
Yes.
That's about who's in the room and who has created the room, right?
Yeah.
Talk to me about that because that's a big issue in this country. My son is a clinical therapist and he works with the LGBTQ plus community, and this is something we're talking about all the time. But tell me about what it feels like for representation in mental health.
So I believe it's massive, right? I mean, because me working in this space, 95% of the people I deal with when it comes to mental health professionals are women. In some cases, that may be 97%, like, because it's just a
Right.
very small percentage of men who are in this space.
Right.
And so, and then when you look at that, then that percentage is a lot lower when you think about men of color, right? And so, like when
Yes.
you have like someone like myself who is not a psychologist, who studies psychology, but very much a person who lived a trauma, you
Yes.
know, filled life. So now I'm able to give a perspective that, or share a perspective that most people in this space cannot share. So
Hmm.
not only if it's representation because a black man, which
Hmm.
is huge considering like the stigma associated with our community, and we don't talk about our
Right.
feelings, our emotions. So to
Hmm.
be someone who has grown into this social, emotional, like intelligence, if you
Hmm.
will, which is something that our community, like you don't see that, like you don't hear it. It's not a part of our conversation. That's huge, right? Because what it does now, it has given so many black men, women, and children permission to say, oh, I'm gonna go get some help. And then if you
Yes.
are white or you're Hispanic or you're any other culture and you have looked at the black community one way and you're like, oh, black men are intelligent, black men are emotional, black men are not just rap videos, black men are not just right. And so it's like, oh, now they're looking and turning their biases away. So
Hmm.
representation, what's being shared, because I can walk around every day and say I represent mental health, right? But it's all
Yes.
about what's coming out of our mouth and what we're doing too. So its representation and its mission is huge. It's
Yes.
so huge because it breaks the invisible barriers, right?
Yes. Yes.
It opens up for more dialogue about maybe we saw this wrong, right?
Hmm.
Because I'm going to talk about what happens in the workplace and how tough it is to work in corporate America. I'm going to talk about
Right.
how tough it is to go to school and to be
Right.
looked at, right? I want to
Hmm.
talk about how segregation probably wasn't the best thing for the black community. It was
Hmm.
probably, like Martin Luther King said, that's never really
Right.
talked about how he thought, oh man, I don't think that was the right thing, right? And
Hmm.
so I'm going to talk about social and economic struggles. I'm going to take you inside of what it's like to be a black man, both who's been abused by his own family, who's been abused by community, who's been abused by this system of oppression.
Yes.
That level of representation does so much. It says,
Right.
oh, I'm understanding that it's a root that's much deeper than what we imagine because I just been throwing little things at them thinking that that's going to cure them and it's not. We have to find a way to really help them. So that's why I tell people, hey, stop calling me to do these different things so you can check off the list of Black History Month. Stop calling me and stop asking me to do stuff like that
Yep.
if you're not empowering us. And I'm not just asking for money. I'm saying
Right.
ask us what we need. Sit us in a room. And if you really want to like shine a light on us as Black people, don't call me during Juneteenth. Don't call me during Black History Month. Call me on a random Tuesday and say, what do you need? How can we help or how can we partner? Because what you represent, if I empower you, I may not feel comfortable coming from the north side like to the south side, right?
Hmm.
But if I empower you, then you can go and build your community.
Hmm.
Because I'm gonna walk in there like with my biases, my good deed is gonna be temporary. But if I empower you, you're going to
Hmm.
have more capacity.
Hmm.
So representation is super important because what it does most, Avanti, it gives other black men, women, and children who look like me, who talk like me, who walk like me, who have gone through or going through like what I'm going through. Man, he made it. He did that. He decided to live today.
Right. I can do
Oh,
it too.
so representation is powerful. And it's different. While it's powerful for a black woman to do the work that I'm doing, women are already talking about their stuff. Black women already hold spaces. I'm not saying
Yeah.
they don't need more of it, but
Yes.
black women show up much different than black men
Yeah.
because they also have a little bit, I'm gonna be careful here, but they have a little bit more privilege than black men, like because there isn't safe spaces for black men. Because if a black man run into a middle of the street and scream right now, and maybe he's screaming from grief, but just because how that looks,
Right.
he would be detained.
Right.
Because something violent and volatile has to be wrong here. But if a black woman, just because of the way we socialize, we have been
Yeah.
socialized as black people, right?
Yes.
But not only socialized, but women from a society standpoint have always been more coddled, right? And it's like, let's protect her. But
Mm-hmm.
you a man, like figure it out. Come on, go be strong.
Mm-hmm.
So on one hand, we've been socialized, but on the other hand, it's like men and women have been viewed and treated much different. So,
Mm-hmm.
so having a black man in this space
Yes.
talking about the things that no one else would talk about,
Right.
it gives you both insight, which creates understanding, which hopefully creates empathy.
Mm-hmm. And leads to transformation. Right.
And you know what? I'm glad you said that because I thought about that. I thought about that word transformation, and I thought about how all of us celebrate so much, but that's no real. It doesn't mean like you can't clap for the small wins, big wins, whatever. But that's why we need more human intelligence because Avanti, there is no true celebration like without transformation. Like when somebody do something big, if it has great impact, something was transformed, which means something exceptional happened. So we all applaud.
Yes.
But if we did something that somebody else can do, and it's gonna be repeated again, like putting a ball in the basket. I mean, that's cool, right? But if we empower people, see, right now, I understand the convenience of AI, but if we're just making machines smart and we're not helping, because what's missing from mental health is human intelligence.
Right.
Because I have at best a 11th grade education on paper at best. But I know a lot of stuff, not because I just look at headlines all day. I read, I study. I study to show myself approved, right? But that's also why I'm able to like live a little better today. I still think about suicide, but because I'm reading and studying, it's teaching me other ways to cope.
Mm-hmm.
When you're downloading exceptional things, it's broadening your perspective.
Right. Right.
And the only thing that separates Avanti, the average person who goes to school, is the person that says, I'm going to do an exceptional amount of reading and studying.
Mm-hmm.
And technically, the only thing that separates two people in class is their memories. When you pass a test, it's because you remembered. It's not so much about formula.
Mm-hmm.
Like while the formula is important, but in most cases, it's just having a great memory. And you can't have a great memory if you're filled with so much trauma
Right.
and chaos. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
why we have to grow our human intelligence
Mm-hmm.
so we can be more rational.
Yeah. You mentioned
Does that make
something.
sense?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want to make
No.
sure that makes sense. What's missing from mental health, we have to tell people
Mm-hmm.
in order to grow your capacity, you have to be smarter. Because here's
Mm-hmm.
the difference. You can be intelligent, but being smart tells you to be kind. You can be intelligent, but being smart says, nah, even though there's a flaw there, you still gotta be integrous and hold that contract.
Mm-hmm.
Or to be smart, I can't say yes today, and I gotta make more room for myself. But there is no being really, really smart like without growing your human intelligence.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
we'll make sure that we throw that in there because that is something that we're missing from the mental health conversation. We need to educate people. People only know what they know, so they're going to
Yes.
do the same thing over and over again
Mm-hmm.
until something else exceptional shows up. People need to be smarter.
Yes. Yes. And they need to have the exposure. And what you're doing is you are connecting with them. You're creating that room, that space to connect with people. And it brings down the defenses so that they can actually hear you, that they
Yes,
can be informed because they're able to then hear what you're talking about, to connect with it in a
absolutely.
different way. Maybe that's what I'm saying. It's not hearing. It's not like people can't hear, but it's more that they can connect with it in a different way. They can be present to
Absolutely.
it in a different way. right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So you
Yeah, and in
mentioned,
order to be, I'm
go ahead.
sorry, in order to be present, you gotta be able to navigate. You gotta be able to compartmentalize. And if you are in distress and you're overwhelmed,
Right.
you can't. Everything sits in one space because you don't know what to do with all of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So like you actually live and behave. That's why people, so like when they look out on the south and west side, they say, oh, so much crime. Well, people are in survivor mode and they trying to just get through the day and everybody's reacting, but everybody's responding to all of that that's sitting. When you don't know what to do with that, you can't make healthy decisions.
Right. Right.
Everything is high level emotional
Right.
response.
You're responding to the energy that you're carrying around. That's how you're responding as well. Yeah.
Yep.
So I want to make sure that I get to this question for you. You know, you mentioned you don't want people just calling you during February, Black History Month, during Juneteenth,
Yes.
check off a box to say, yeah, I
Yes.
support this. How can anyone who's listening, individuals, organizations, mental health professionals, healthcare professionals, how can they support you, your mission, contribute to it? What do you need?
If you are spiritual and you have a relationship with God, pray for us. I mean, because there are some things that are unseen. We don't know what's ahead of us.
Mhm,
So even if you have a strategy, you don't have a strategy for the unseen or the unknown,
mhm,
right? So if you're spiritual, pray for us. If you have money, well, and you live in the city of Chicago or surrounding states, well, our second annual Black Tie event is coming up. It's called Igniting Green. Starbucks, the same place where I had that very messy meltdown, has given us a very beautiful in-kind donation, which is they give us the big roastery to do the black tie event on May 8th. They pay for all the food and they give us this big, beautiful space to raise money. And our goal is to raise $500,000 so we can have a reserve, so we can put towards our therapy program, so we can sustain as a business model. Because the cafe is used to offset when we're waiting for grants and donation. That's why we built the
right,
business, right? And because currency isn't, money is the only form of currency, there are people who are helping us build a library. They're sending us psychology books to the cafe. So when people show up, we can educate them. We can say, you can read. Send us some beautiful books. If you want to volunteer, every Friday we have a standing volunteer session where you can show up from 3 to 5 and help us in the cafe. You can do anything to help us. You want to clean, you want to write on cups, whatever, right? We
okay,
need you in that regard because again, everybody don't have the money, right?
mhm,
But you have, but you work for companies that do. Like you can talk to your boss, right? You can
mhm,
spread the word. You can go to
right,
social media and share our messages. Those are the ways that you can help. You can come to an event, right? Come to the coffee shop. We're looking to sell 100 cups per day. So
okay,
while you may not have thousands of dollars, come and buy a few cups a day from us. We
yeah,
make good coffee. It's not just a nonprofit that has coffee. No, we make
yeah,
really good coffee. And
yes,
so we want people to volunteer in a different way. Volunteer not just your time, volunteer those dollars.
mhm,
It's a tax write off, right? If that's important to you, right? But I'll end on this, with in terms of help. Yes, donations are a beautiful thing, and we always need it. We always need money. We're looking for more therapists because we want to always be HIPAA compliant, and we want to protect the people in the room. So we need therapists to volunteer their time in our space. Show up and say, "Hey, I'm just going to be here in a space," because sometimes people come in and want to cry. And we don't know what to do if it's a crowd, right?
yep,
So show up and be in a room. You psych majors, you student therapists, right? The people that may have the capacity.
yep,
Because here's the deal. Here's why we also can't just do a free therapy program, because if we're telling black people to come to therapy, they want to sit across somebody that look like them. But most black therapists don't have the financial capacity to offer pro bono or discounted services, right?
mhm,
It's
right,
important that, like the people that can do it show up in those spaces and
mhm,
volunteer that way. Because if I'm going to be put in, I can't continue as we pace in year 5, like to be the only person to champion mental health in my space because it's not sustainable for me to
Right.
constantly leverage my own story
Hmm.
and and to educate. It's not sustainable. So we need people, more ambassadors. So if mental health is a thing for you and you care about people, not about your own stuff, but you care about people, and you're a therapist and you want to donate your time once a week for a couple of hours, that's going to help us faster because the need is greater and more people are coming. And I don't have it all, right?
Right.
I leverage my own stuff. Now we need more therapists to show up in a
Hmm.
unique way to
Hmm.
meet these people. So I hope that was enough,
Yes, yes. And
let
I
people
know
know.
I know a therapist who will be calling you.
Yes,
And for everyone who's listening, we will make sure that we provide links to all of these resources, to Christopher's website, to donate. All of that will be linked in the show notes for you so you can just click and get to where you need to so you can help out in the ways that you can. So,
absolutely. And normalizedtherapy.com. That's
okay.
it. We're looking to launch normalizedtherapy.com. Sorry, Avanti,
No, please.
on May 1st. But before we
Amazing.
do that, everybody go to normalizedtherapy.com. If you're a mental health specialist, a therapist, we're looking to feature you. So we need you all to sign up if you want to help us with this work. Okay?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Normalizedtherapy.com.
Okay. And so that's what's next. And we're going to be watching what you're doing. I just have one last question for you because I know we are like over our time together,
All
which
good.
is something I ask every guest who comes on the podcast. This podcast is called The Healing Catalyst. And so
Yes. Love the name, by the way.
if I offer up the phrase to catalyze healing, what comes up for you?
Ooh, personally or in general?
Both.
I cannot thank coffee enough. Coffee was a catalyst to me because when I decided to go into that coffee shop that day, Avanti, it was because I was pacing 40 and I was working a dead end job and I didn't have enough money to like buy lunch. So I went to the coffee shop to curb my appetite. Boy, did I not know that that day in that coffee shop was going to change my life. So the fact that I became this barista, I own a coffee shop, and that coffee shop is a refuge not only for myself but for so many people. Coffee has been the catalyst for me. A coffee shop model has been the catalyst. And like the other thing that I will also want to talk about is probably, which is most significant outside of coffee, is all the people along the way of Avanti that just helped me, that gave me a couch, that gave me food, gave me their car to sleep in because I didn't have room in the house, but I could sleep in their car. The people that gave me money, like to make sure I was eating. All those people are directly responsible for what I'm doing now because there is no pay it forward model without all those people paying it forward to me because they carried me. They got me here. And so now, while I may not be able to thank all of them, because some of them I lost touch, I don't know where they are anymore. I grew up. So, as a tribute to all of them, this company exists. Coffee and all the people along the way that said, I'm going to help you in this season. They ultimately helped me heal in so many ways in one. So, I dedicate everything to them. So, if you're listening, thank you. Thank you very much for helping me.
I'm speechless. Christopher, thank you. I'm nearly in
You
tears. I just am I'm really moved by your story about by what you're doing.
are very
Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
thank you. Thank you for being on my podcast.
Absolutely. Like I'll do it again. I would love to do it live. Let's do it live at the
Let's do it
shop.
live. Let's do
Yeah,
it.
so thank you for the opportunity because I don't know the people that you know, right? And so that's why I'm very grateful, for the opportunity because I get to share my story and that helps other people because there's somebody sitting at a desk right now who seems to look good on the outside that just don't know what to do, and this is going to help them go another day.
Yes.
You
So
know, so I appreciate you because you are a catalyst for so many people. You smart, beautiful, brilliant woman.
thank you.
Okay, so I
Thank you.
honor you today, and I
Thank you.
thank you. and let's stay in a space of gratitude. Fair
Yes.
enough?
Yes. Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
very welcome.
Thank you.